On the 28th of September 2025, we are going to be nominally moving into, well, it's psychological types, and it is chapter 5, the type problem in poetry, and it is section 4, the relativity of the symbol, section A, the worship of woman, and the worship of the soul. It's in Jung from page 221 of psychological types. But before that, we'll be drawing from Viveki a little bit. So, what's the problem that we're tackling here? Well, we're continuing on from what we've been talking about already, which is the sort of, I'm trying to understand at the moment, I'm trying to articulate what is it about symbols which is important. So there was a time in July 2025 when, I'm just going to show you what I painted today. Like that. Actually, no, like that. And I'm not going to bother trying to explain this really, but this is a two-dimensional representation, meaning like a painting. And it's a painting of an experience. And I had an experience where this hyperdimensional object opened up, it unfolded, and over the course of a day, and then folded up again. So it's a kind of there's an opening of a certain space that then closed up again, and it sort of corresponded to this descent from propositional through procedural down to the level of perspectival and participatory insight or gnosis. So it's a transformative space which opened and closed. And it took the form of this cross shape. And it also took the form of this going through duality into the problem of 3 and 4, this transformative space. And it had quite the impact on me. And this is part of the reason that I've been discussing since before that time and after it, the importance of that quote from Maria Prophetessa, from 1 becomes 2, meaning like from 1 becomes 2, duality. From 2 becomes 3, moving into the Trinity structure. And from the third comes the 1 as the fourth. It's a way that the central place corresponds with an awareness of the whole or the all. So we can see from that like obviously there's an unconscious layer, nominally largely unconscious layer of symbolic understanding, which is been structuring, I want to say, our awareness that we have not been conscious of. And I believe that the intentional evocation and indeed invocation of spaces that are designed to bring that into consciousness can be transformative and healing and inspiring, and connecting in the sense of a deeper sense of connectedness with what is real, in a way that can help us to navigate through the meaning crisis, metacrisis combo. And what I'm trying to unpack is why that is today. So what is it about symbols that help us to do that? I'm drawing a little from episode 3 in this series, which talks about, for Jung, it's this when we lost the functionality of shamanism in the move to the Holocene, so the agrarian revolution, then we lost access to shamanistic technologies, which basically split up our thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting faculties so that we experience them differently. And by way of analogy, we also lost, at that time, we lost a certain kind of symbolic understanding, or what Henry Corbin would call it, we lost access to the imaginal world, lost access to an imaginal way of experiencing things, largely. And it was because of our, because of the decline in the practice of certain intentional technologies, psychotechnologies, meaning there was an ecology of practices that was going on, that stopped going on. And that changed our cognition. It changed our experience of being in the world in a way which we can discover to be, and notice to be unsustainable. So the idea is that we need to recover, remember definitely some of what we've lost. I mean, it also involves innovation, I think, and drawing upon the cultural traditions that have arisen since that agrarian revolution. It's very much going along with what Viveki is talking about, and that's part of the reason that I want to invoke him today. So if I try and share my screen, let's see how I go with that. That should be working. So showcasing my technological lack of facility. Don't even have the words today. So yeah, episodes 35 and 48 of Awakening to the Meaning Crisis. So first about symbols, drawing from John Viveki. What's the importance of symbols? Well, they're epic. And that's actually an, is it anagram? I forget the word for whatever this means. You can see here. Yep. So again, dive into episodes 35 and 48 because I don't really have time to unpack all this. I'm drawing upon it. So they're epic as in symbols. They're ecstatic. What does ecstatic mean in this context? They help us to stand beyond ourselves. So they help us to expand our framing, expand our understanding, our perception, our experience of the world in a way which transforms it. So they open us up to dimensions of the world, aspects of the world, which are beyond our framing of the world, beyond our interpretive schema. So they're ecstatic, and it says they help us stand beyond ourselves, get outside of the framing that we've been using. That's what we mean by ecstatic in this context. Participatory, they open up. Symbols not only refer, they help us to participate in that to which they refer. So they open up access to the perspectival and participatory layers or aspects, ways of knowing that make that available to us. And what that's really making available is gnosis, like transformation of the experience of self and world. What we mean by gnosis in this context. I will have more to say at some point about it's Robert Avens, the new gnosis on the topic of gnosis itself and the topic of the imaginal, drawing more from Corbin and James Hillman, and Heidegger as well, but we're not doing that today. I'm just referring to some of these terms and trying to integrate them a little bit better. I said integrate because I'm looking at epic, the third letter of which is integrative. So what do we mean by that? Let's see what John is trying to talk about. Integ, right? Yeah, so he's talking here about meta-accommodation, meta-assimilation. So this is like Piagetian terminology, where we are both opened up to the world and then drawing down the world to fit our scheme of things. And there's a kind of complexification process where we're sort of opened up and then closed down again, and opened up and closed down again. It's kind of breathing. It's a good metaphor to describe this. Symbols help make the dynamism of that process available to us. So they one term that's relevant here is anagogic ascent, as in this is a kind of up and out of Plato's cave and then back down into the cave again, and up and out of Plato's cave and back down into the cave again. It's this anagogic ascent is it's a kind of developmental process of successive transformations that are opened up and then integrated, and opened up and then integrated. This is a kind of developmental functionality. I mean, we're better adapted to the world if the relationship between self and world can have this breathing, dynamic, and developmental quality. So it's adaptive in that sense. And that's all I wanted to talk about here. Epic. The fourth one was complex, as in symbols themselves are complex. What do I mean by that? Well, they're complex unfolding realities. What does John mean by this? Well, it says here, I guess, what he's talking about. I think complexity in this context is a kind of technical term. I think I would say it's like the layer of complexity. It's like can we be in the recognition? Can we see that the world that we're in is deeply complex, right? Well, the symbols make that sense of perception available to us, and they are themselves complex realities. This is why they're not just referring, but we participate in them, and they afford that participation in their being. So symbols have this kind of complexity. Give the example of the cross from Christianity, because that just happens to be the one that I feel connected with at the moment. It's kind of what I was trying to draw. Well, there's a complexity which is inherent within symbols like that, which can't exactly be explained away, can't be defined. It's like there's a numinosity or a relevance to symbols like that speaks to their complexity. They're complex realities that we don't know how to understand them. Like, give you an example of Peterson's point, but like with very famous paintings. Like, for example, I'm thinking of Hieronymus Bosch paintings. I mean, imagine trying to do philosophy about those paintings. We could literally do hours and hours and hours of philosophy trying to explain what they are, or simply recognize that there's a complex reality embedded in objects like that, that is inherent in their being. It's a sum of what symbols are. And I'm going to leave this here. Obviously, symbols are deeply connected to sacredness and to religio and to mythos. I'm not going to go into all of that. I'm going to jump to episode 48. Again, this is I was talking about that process of like losing shamanism and then having our faculties cut off from each other, being split into, for example, sensation, feeling, thinking, and feeling, sensation, intuition, thinking, and feeling. But a different example of the same sort of thing is that from Descartes, we inherit these distinctions between the abstract intelligible world and concrete sensible world, and also between the subjective and the objective. And this is where the imaginal and the symbols and images which constitute the imaginal way of experiencing the world can recombine and recohere those, let's say, dualities. Jung goes into this in great detail. I think we can see from this that the symbols are like a bridge, which is itself a metaphor. This is what John's talked about. It's like symbols bridge between the concrete and the abstract, or the sensible and the abstract, and they bridge between the subjective and the objective. You can see that there's a sense that we have that recovering a symbolic understanding of the world cannot be a pejorative thing, like, oh, it's just symbolic, but it can be a deep restoration and recovery of a mode of being in the world, which we've lost. And in Heideggerian terms, it's sort of it can help us to overcome the forgetfulness of being. So it can reveal more in the aletheia sense. It can reveal more truth, reveal more of reality to us. It's also an antidote to fundamentalism and literalism, which basically we can fade into any of these directions. It's all about the abstract mental, or it's all about the concrete sensible, or it's all about the subject, or it's all about the object. There are whole philosophies built on each of these different positions. The idea of the imaginal world and this symbolic understanding that constitutes that imaginal way of experiencing the world, it restores what Jung calls, what Viveki describes as transformative transframing. It evokes a kind of dynamism, kind of capacity for transformation, which is otherwise unavailable to us. A capacity for gnosis, in other terms, opening us up to the ground of being, which is the domain of sacredness. Okay, I'm going to now wonder if I have been sharing or not. Anyway, I am screen sharing and I want to stop screen sharing. Okay. Again, incapable of articulating myself properly or of using technology properly. So maybe you should be listening to someone else. Okay. I'm going to move from there to go back to Jung. So I'm hoping that all of that as a little bit more of a modern understanding of why symbols are important in this can help us to approach Jung in a different way. With Jung, we've been talking about the mediating symbol, right? The idea that there is the processes between duality, which is actually the process of sagehood, the way of being, which is designed to help us become like a sage, or to achieve enlightenment, or reverse engineer enlightenment in Vivekian terms, or transcend the split, transcend the fallen condition, the dual condition, split condition, which is constituting our being. These are all languages to describe the same. We've been stuck in a certain dualistic tendency, I would say, ever since we started using stone tools, and we're trying to navigate ourselves out of that split condition, that stuck condition. And symbols are supposed to help us do that. And what I'm speaking of is the symbol, which is like it's not just a symbol. That's the thing. It's a symbol that we participate in. It's a ritual space that opens up and then closes down again. It's a transformative experience. And I think, when we can share more about that and integrate that into our being in the world, it can solve the problem of 3 and 4. And what I mean by that is like help us to participate more deeply in nature itself, in the natural world, rather than the artificial cultural world that we've inherited. And that's definitely a lot of what Jung has been talking about, that we were talking about last time. Last time we were evoking all of this from the Vedas and Upanishads, all these Eastern metaphors, these symbols for this way of being, the way that, as in the Tao, but also as in the way to Brahman, through things like religious practice. For example, we were talking about invoking Agni as a way to sort of make Brahman more present. Yeah, it's the irrational union of opposites. And to Jung, that's an inherently symbolic process, and symbols represent a mediating position that by evoking that mediating position, we can actually experience firsthand the kind of transformation that allows us to participate more deeply in the essence of our being, in the divine that we are, that we don't recognize that we are. Again, difficult to speak about. So that allows me to finally move on and talk about, I just happened, at the moment, I happen to be reading, where did it go? 1 second. I happen to be reading The Quest for the Holy Grail, which describes 12th century text. It describes, the different spiritual virtues of the Knights of the Round Table as they pursue the Holy Grail, where the Holy Grail is a feminine symbol that we're going to be talking about. And it's essentially, it's the pursuit of the same thing. It's the pursuit of the golden snitch, the philosopher's stone, the jewel in the lotus. The divine child is also a symbol of this. It's the hero, the birth of the hero. It's the jewel that we can never find. It's a particular symbol that has it's a feminine symbol in a certain way. And what we're trying to explore is sort of like, what's the relevance of this questing, adventuring process, and how is it connected to feminine symbolism, particularly the worship of woman that we have, let's say, largely forgotten in the Christian spiritual culture that's all about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's kind of like, where's the feminine in that? This is Jung's whole point. So Jung says, page, and there's going to be rather a lot of quotation here. Kind of left a bit of that out last time, but I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to include the stuff that can be fast-forwarded through if someone's not interested in the quotations. So, again, we're talking about uniting different pairs of opposites, mediating the split between different opposites by evoking this transformative process that allows libido, or the energy of life, to flow through us in a way which can knit or weave our being back together, rather than have us stuck in this split condition. The idea that what it means to be a human is to transmute or alchemize these different splits, these different dichotomies, dualities, polarities within us. And the Christian principle, which unites the opposites, is the worship of God. Whereas in Buddhism, it's what Jung calls the worship of the self. So it's a self-developmental process. Whereas in Spidler and Goethe, who we've been talking about extensively in relation to Prometheus and Pandora, it's the worship of the soul, symbolized by the worship of woman. So the connection here that Jung wants to make is that the woman is for Jung at least, the worship of woman is itself a symbol, and it's a symbol of the connection to the anima, or the soul. And so the idea here is that through worship, through religious practice, again, by cultivating a deep relationship with the soul, one is also cultivating a deep relationship with symbolic understanding of things, with an imaginal understanding. This is very much coinciding with, again, the stuff from episode 48 and 49 in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis that has to do with the divine double. It's the soul as psychopomp. We were talking about this also in the context of, for example, Agni was a kind of psychopomp that allows us to connect more deeply with Brahman. It's these imaginal figures, not only the soul, but that can evoke a symbolic understanding, allow us deeper access to, I would say, the uniqueness of our being in some way, like the deeper aspects of self-expression that help us to, remember a symbolic way of experiencing things that can allow us to participate more deeply in transformative experiences, which can change our sense of existing in the world. Now, for you, I'm just going to try and navigate my way through Jung here. He's saying that the worship of woman essentially means worship of the soul. That's expressed in the Divine Comedy, a lot, Dante's Divine Comedy. And so we're going to use these quotes to point to what Jung means. So Jung needs to justify his claim that the worship of woman is connected, at least connected to, I wouldn't want to say reduced to, worship of the soul, because we could be talking about the worship of woman for its own sake, rather than for the sake of something else. Quote from Divine Comedy: "O Virgin Mother, daughter of thy Son, humbler and more exalted than all others, predestined object of the eternal will, thou gavest such nobility to man, that he who made mankind did not disdain to make himself a creature of his making." Other verses alluding to this development: "This man who from the nethermost abyss of all the universe, as far as here, has seen the spiritual existences, now asks thy grace, so thou wilt grant him strength, that he may with his eyes uplift himself still higher toward the ultimate salvation." The idea here is like an analogy from the quest for the Holy Grail is pretty good. It's like the Knights of the Round Table are seeking something. They're seeking an object hard to attain. For example, a feminine symbol like the Holy Grail. And it's something about this, their different spiritual virtues in the text are what allow them to succeed or fail. The different spiritual virtues that they embody or lack sort of correspond to the degree of progress that they can make, how far they can get on their quest for the Holy Grail. So the idea is something like that the worship of the feminine symbol, and indeed the questing for that, the adventure to get that, to attain that, corresponds to the process of anagogic ascent. It corresponds to the transformative process of developing ourselves to be wiser and in some sense more spiritually pure beings. It would be the language that is used in the quest of the Grail. That help us. Essentially, they're talking about a process of self-development, of spiritual development. That's kind of the significance of the worship of feminine symbols. Goes on, more quotes from Dante. "I proffer to thee all my prayers, and pray they may suffice, that thou wilt scatter from him every cloud of his mortality with thine own prayers, so that the bliss supreme may be revealed. May thy protection quell his human passions. Lo, Beatrice, and many a blessed soul, entreat thee with clasped hands to grant my wish." Okay, so I'm going to jump off. So this is going to be 17 part A. So I hope this is an interesting introduction to the relevance of symbols to this process and drawing on some of Viveki's content. And we're going to keep diving into Dante and talking about the symbolism of the Grail and the feminine worship of the feminine in the context of the relevance of symbols and participating in symbols and the sacred in 17 part B, which will be, I don't know when, sometime.